we had some decent traffic on that. And it was one of those things where it's like, we've got it there, but we're not really doing anything with it. But I have always recorded audio and video, and I just put the video in a folder. I'm like, yeah, maybe one day we'll deal with that. Well, one day is shown up. So, we've got, hundreds of videos that we have not uploaded to the channel. And we're like, okay, how do we want to go about this?
Today's episode of My Podcast Story, we have Mike here, D. Levitt, the founder and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Michael hosts the acclaimed Breakfast Leadership Show, a top-ranked podcast that dives deep into the critical issues of burnout prevention and workplace culture. With over 25 years of experience in leadership and executive coaching, he combines practical strategies with a profound understanding of the emotional and psychological aspects of burnout. Michael's unique journey, marked by his personal experiences and professional insights, has positioned him as a thought leader in this vital area. He's here to share his inspiring journey on how he built his show from the ground up and how he's making a significant impact in the fight against burnout. Okay, tell us your name, the name of your podcast, and what your podcast is about.
Yep. My name is Michael Levitt, and the show is the Breakfast Leadership Show. It talks with thought leaders all across the globe, small business to entrepreneurs to successful entrepreneurs, business owners, C-suite executives, billionaires, professors at Harvard, you name it. I've had just an amazing time talking. I'm approaching 900 episodes. I've been doing it since 2017. So been at it for quite a long time and continue to have a lot of fun with it.
What's the frequency of the podcast?
Right now, it's almost every day. Because I've had such a backlog of guests that have come on, and I want to, make sure to, get the shows out, because what we're talking about lately, especially, is pretty timely. We're talking about current events, so I want to get those released, within a certain period of time, so when the audience is listening to it, it's still relatively fresh. But yeah, it's almost daily. It's almost a daily show now.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was the reason you started the podcast?
Well, I was doing consulting with organizations and individuals on fighting burnout. A lot of people have been dealing with burnout for a long time, and I had my own personal journey with burnout back in 2009, and it was not a fun experience, but I recovered from it and was able to redesign my life in a way that I wouldn't burn out ever again. And I started to see people in my industry that I was working in were doing the same things that I did that led me to burning out. I started to work with those people, and then I started writing articles and started speaking at conferences and whatnot. And then a good colleague of mine named Steve, said, you should do a podcast. And I really didn't want to. I was like, I don't want to do a podcast. What would I talk about? And he just encouraged me to talk about how to avoid burnout, just little short segments, quick interviews if need be. And so, that started me on my journey back in 2017, and here we are in 2025. As I said, I'm approaching 900 episodes, so it's been an absolute blast. I enjoy the heck out of it, and it's something that I encourage. People that want to do it, they should do it. And even because there's, everybody says, well, there's already a podcast about this, or there's already a podcast about this subject. But I tell them, yeah, but not from your point of view. People need to hear all of our opinions and have dialogue around that. And I think that's what's so important. So when anybody says, I'm thinking about launching a podcast, I tell them, please do.
Yeah. You've been podcasting now for going on to 8 years. When you started the podcast, what were you hoping to get out of the podcast?
Well, for me, it was initially just to start to educate people that were listening, on how to avoid burnout. And then, after 60 or so episodes, I started to interview some people, and from all kinds of walks of life. And then I really started to enjoy that, because I get to, talk with some really cool people that normally I probably wouldn't have never talk to. So it kind of spun off from there. And now, I get to talk to all kinds of different leaders and individuals. The other day, I interviewed somebody that used to be, they were in prison a couple times and they weren't living a good life. And now, they're a leadership consultant and really doing it. I interviewed about a month ago someone who was the daughter of an assassin, someone that was hired to kill people. Yeah, so really interesting stories, and you get to talk to these individuals and kind of hear what their perspective was like growing up in situations like that, and dealing with those life challenges, because it brings out the human in all of us.
Yeah. Just I love for us to step back a bit. Your podcast is called the Breakfast Leadership Show.
Correct.
Was was that the first choice of name, or were there other names before that?
Well, I launched my company named Breakfast Leadership back in 2016. So I thought, why don't I just keep it consistent? Because I was getting some good traction with the Breakfast Leadership name as far as web traffic and activity and on social media. So I thought, well, let's keep it consistent and just name the show that as well.
Yeah. You earlier on, I asked you the reason you started the podcast, and you talked about you wanted to educate people, you wanted to have exciting conversations and stories with people from thought leaders, entrepreneurs, Harvard, and you doing that. You've done that for about 900 episodes, and you're still doing that. Now the question is, how has that rubbed off on you? What has been the impact that has had on you as the host?
Well, for me, both personal and professional growth. I've made great friends, colleagues, some people that I've done business with, and helped out their organizations with some things. But
Uh,
there's a lot of people that I met back in 2017, that I would consider dear friends that I met from doing this. But what I get from it, obviously from the personal growth, is you get to talk to some really amazing human beings, and even astronauts and former conductors of orchestras, and Amy Edmondson, for example, in the U.S. She's a Harvard professor, but she's the one that kind of pioneered psychological safety in the workplace. She's got a framework and a study that follows that, and I had Amy on my show a while ago, and again, I wouldn't have had an opportunity in all likelihood to ever meet her. And not only that, but now you get to have one-on-one conversation with people before you hit record, or even after. You can talk with people, and I've had a handful of guests, not many, but a handful of guests I've had on the show a few times, because they just bring great content that people want to hear and listen to, and they're just great human beings.
yeah. The juice is in the details. So I'm going to drill down a bit, and it's in two. The questions in two phases. First, what are some of the relationships you mentioned about relationships? Can you give us about one, two, three, depending on the ones you can get all the top out of the top of your head of relationship you got from podcasting, and then you could also give us two to three exciting of all the 900 episodes you've done. Two to three of your most favorite episodes, conversations you've had, and kind of get us into the details.
Yeah, for me, I'll start off with one. It was individual named Mark that I had on my show a while ago. He, brought me into his organization, thriving, growing agency just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and he brought me to speak to his team, who had grown quite a bit over the last few years. And this was, a few years after the COVID pandemic, and they brought the entire organization together, because most people were working remotely from different parts of the country, and they brought all the employees in for the first time. Many of these people, I would say, because they had grown quite a bit, they had basically grown 3 times in size, and the majority of those people had never met each other in person before. So it was a great event for everybody involved, and I was thrilled to be a part of that, to kind of talk with them about how to avoid burnout when you're working remotely, and how to work, now that things were at that point, we're starting to return to work and all of that, how to navigate that, because it was a very stressful time for a lot of people. So, that was, a great relationship. And then from there, Mark was kind enough to introduce me to a handful of conferences where I performed some keynote talks and some speaking engagements with these organizations to help share, the message of why, fighting burnout is such an important thing. And I also talk about workplace culture and keeping good people and hiring the right people for your teams and being a better leader. And, there's a lot of things that I have interest in. But, that's one big relationship that, really has helped out, tenfold for me, and thrilled that that organization continues to grow and thrive. I love the work that, Jen and Mark are doing there, and I think they're just doing an amazing, amazing job there. As far as memorable interviews, the one with Mark was good too, because he's passionate about people and the right organizations and all that, but he also is a huge advocate of reinventing healthcare in America. And healthcare in America is a very expensive thing. People are getting sicker and sicker, and he's got some great ideas on how to make that better. And I used to work in the healthcare industry years ago, so it resonated with me as well. Another interview that I mention a lot when I'm on shows or even on my own is an interview that I did with Maestro Roger Nierenberg, a former conductor of an orchestra, and now he's a leadership consultant. And again, I interviewed Roger a while back, but I love what he does. He goes into organizations and he brings a small orchestra with him to the event or to the conference or the meeting. And what he does is he has the orchestra set up in basically an orchestra pit where musicians are all together and they start playing music. But what he does is he has the employees of this organization sit in with the orchestra in their pit, and they first start playing. And of course, whenever you first start rehearsing, you're not in sync, you don't sound good, the harmonies are off, and it's just not a good thing. But after a while, the musicians start playing together, it sounds better, it sounds beautiful music. And then what he does is he's up on a podium, so he's higher up than where the orchestra is. And he
Yeah.
starts bringing up employees up to where he is, and they start playing the music again. And everyone is blown away because the music sounds different from an elevated location. And everybody's like, how can that sound different? Are they playing different music? No, it's the same notes, note for note. It's identical, but it sounds different from that vantage point. And he said, that's, what leadership is all about, is from a leader's point of view, they see and hear things differently than people that are on the front lines and doing work. And it goes the other way too, where the people that are doing all the work in the trenches and in the day-to-day operations, the leader doesn't see or hear the same things that they do. So it hammers
Yeah.
home the fact why communication is so important, because once, each party kind of shares what their insights are, that's where breakthroughs can happen. And, it's, still, and you're not supposed to have a favorite interview. And I've had hundreds of amazing interviews, so I'm not picking on any of them saying that they weren't, but that one stands out for me because it resonated with me on how the importance of communication and being a good leader and being a good employee, it really pays a big dividend.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing those two stories. Now, when I listened to a couple of your episodes, your interview, they were quite smooth, right? It was as if you knew how to. Okay, you've been doing this for a long time, 8 years now. It was as if it's a natural, like, it's the questions are just coming up and the conversations are just flowing, and one would wonder, wow, it seems this this guy was made with the skill, the gift, and the talent. So I'm curious, were you always this good in terms of interviewing, having conversations with people 8 years ago before you started the podcast? Or did the podcast have anything to do with
No.
refining?
Well, the podcast definitely, in combination with keynote talks and working with people and that, I've definitely improved over those initial interviews. But I think what's helped me is, and I've interviewed people that talk about subjects that I have no idea about. I'm not familiar with them at all, so I'm learning along with the audience. And I like asking questions that kind of get the guests to share their insights and their viewpoints of whatever they're talking about, whether it's leadership or retention or how to do things or how they grew a business or how they survived a really challenging time in their life. I I want to show the human side of things. And a comment that I get a lot from people that listen to the show, and thank you for, bringing awareness to this as well, is a lot of people will say, it's as if I'm just sitting in a room with myself and the other person, and we're having a conversation over coffee or tea. We're just having a natural conversation, and that has come over time for me because that's just I resonate with that. If I was to listen to my show, I do. I listen to it, but I'm listening to it, making sure, okay, how did that sound? Am I looking for his? I'm not listening to it as a consumer per se. I'm listening to it. It's like, okay, how did that go? Should I? Is there anything I could have done a little bit better, or that went well, or maybe I should do that? So I'm listening to my show differently than most people would listen to it. But for me, it's grown over time where, and a lot of people say, well, you must do a lot of preparation work. Well, I do, but not to the extent that a lot of people think that I would. I look at the guest bio if it's provided. If it's not, then I go research and find out, okay, what's this person about? Where are they from? Maybe what are they doing? What have they done? Is there any commonalities that we have that we can share? Case in point, I was on a show the other day, and the host is really good friends with a guest that I had on the show basically a week before. I didn't know that they knew each other. And they said, yeah, I said, your interview with Ken Miller. I'm like, yeah, that was a great interview. He said, I had dinner with him last night. We were talking about you. I'm like, all lies. I'm sure they were all lies. I didn't do any of that stuff. And of course they laugh, but it's, it was like, okay, is this big blue ball that we float around in space on. We are so connected in so many ways. So it's a case of you hear stories like that. You're like, how do you know this? And I'll get messages all the time, from people saying, well, how do you know Anissa? I'm like, well, I met Anissa at an event here. Why? Well, she's my cousin, or, I worked with her at this organization and I lost track of her. Thank you. We just reconnected because of you. I'm like, I just had her on the show. I didn't know. It's like, well, let me make sure the people that are looking for Anissa can find her. But I do. I want want her to be successful, and that's the case for every guest. It's like I want people to understand these are people that are doing amazing things, in my opinion. And they may be big, life-changing things, or they might be something really small, and not small, but not, this going to change the world, but it's changing their world, and it could change the world of people that are listening. So for me, it's just, I just have so much fun to do it, basically doing it because, again, I get to talk to amazing people around this planet. And in many cases, I probably would have never had an opportunity to meet these people otherwise. So I use it as a platform to basically, expand my knowledge, my own personal knowledge and growth, and learn, because I take notes all the time, and whether it's a guest I'm interviewing or even if I'm being interviewed, I'll take notes and like, okay, that's something I want to look into, or, because I'm always wanting to learn new things because, I have a brain, surprisingly, and I want it to use it as much as I can.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I love for us to go into how the podcast is made. And just out of curiosity, are you the one producing, editing your show, or you've hired?
I use some additional resources and people to do a lot of the back end stuff. I've got assistants that will do the show notes and cobble everything together and kind of manage the scheduling side of things a bit. And then for me, I hop on Zoom. I use Zoom. I've been using Zoom for a long time. I know there's other platforms, just like, Riverside, is a great one too. And excuse me, there's a bunch of them out there, and I've used of course, being on a bunch of shows, I've been on or used most of them, and all of them are good. For me, Zoom is just something that I'm comfortable with. I've used it for a long time. It's been reliable for me, and I just continue to use it. Even, I got an email earlier today. They're raising their prices next month. It's like, everyone else is too. So I'm not shocked by it. I'm not upset that it's going to be an extra $1 a month or whatever it is. I don't remember what the amount is, but I look at it as, okay, if they came in and they said, oh, it's going to be an extra, $100 a month or something, then I'd be like, okay, it looks like I'm going to be using something else, because it would be, that would be pricing me out of it.
Yeah.
But I use that, and they've invested a ton of money and resources into growing and rolling a lot of things out. And I spoke with one of their executives at a conference. This was 2 years ago, I think, and they had a big booth at this conference. So I spent probably a good half hour at this booth talking with them just about life, business, what I was doing, and how I used their platform. And they showed me a lot of the innovation tools that they were thinking about rolling out, which a lot of them they have rolled out now. I don't use most of them. I could, but I'm kind of entrenched in a lot of the tools that I use anyway. But so kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. So I use a calendar scheduling system through my CRM, which is I use Go High Level. That's my CRM that I used. And I migrated over to them last December because I was looking for a system that could do a lot more all in one thing, and then I could obviously assign my assistants and other help to be able to help out with a lot of the different things that we're doing. And that's an ongoing.
What were you using?
Prior to that, I was using kind of a combination of either HubSpot or just having people use, Calendly or another scheduling tool. There's a bunch of them out there. A good one that I use or have used in the past, and I do recommend people because the price point on it it's called TidyCal. It's very straightforward, but it's nice and clean. It works really well. If I wanted to streamline things to basics, or if I sell my company and I restart, I probably would, maybe consider using that instead, depending on what I was doing. But yeah, so, use Go High Level for the scheduling, which does a, great job of capturing that kind of stuff. And then obviously they can utilize it for email marketing as well. If I, want to send things out, I don't send a lot out. I know people yell at me for not doing that. I know I can hear Virginia yelling at me right now, and she's not even anywhere near me in where I am. And she's, probably a good 2,000 miles away from me, but I can still hear her yelling at me about that. And eventually I'll do it. But for me, it's you spend your time on where things are. So again, getting back to the setup of the podcast. So use the schedule to get booked, Zoom, which it sends out the link to the guest, to the recording. They click on it. I come in, I click record. I'm also using an additional app, although I don't necessarily need to, because Zoom added the show notes where it kind of captures the conversation and uses AI to kind of, put together some show notes for you, which I've used a lot of it in unison with the information that the guest provides me. I don't just say, here's what we talked about. I want the guest to provide me their bio information so I can share that because it's in their voice. And then couple that with, some highlights from the show. And then from there, those get merged into the show notes. And I use Podbean for my platform. I've been on other platforms as well, but I've been with Podbean for a few years now, and they do a great job. Yes, there's the big ones like Libsyn, and there's some other ones that are out there. And for me, again, Podbean has been amazing for me, and I love the simplicity of it. It's real easy to use, affordable, and again, it's one of those things where, and they're innovating things and adding things too. So I think that's one of the big takeaways with no matter what you're doing as a podcaster is find the tools you like. I mean, people can tell you, and I can tell you, we'll use this, but I won't. I find the tools that you're comfortable with because they're just tools. You don't want your tool to overwhelm you to the point where you hate doing the podcast. You want to use something that just how it works. Here it is. Here's this. Boom. You do it, and then what that does is it maximizes the time that you spend in the actual conversation or interview. And when you do that, it's a lot more fun. And then so once the show's done, then the show gets saved to Zoom or on the computer. We grab the raw files, the audio file and the video file, and then from there we have it edited. We use a couple different tools for editing. There's one, Adobe has one that it does a really, really good job of removing the background noise out of things. And
Yeah,
there was
the
an
big
interview
boss.
that I did. Yeah, there was an interview I did. This was about 3 weeks ago. Excuse me. And the guest, they sounded like they were kind of talking to me inside of an aluminum can. And it wasn't echoes. It wasn't like an echo. It was just the sound
Yeah.
quality wasn't good. But I ran through Adobe. They played it. It sounded like that they were speaking on a
Wow.
professional microphone. There was
Wow.
no sound at all. I mean, I think it's called Adobe Enhance. Just you can Google
Yeah.
Adobe, MP3 cleanup or something like that, and they give you I think 30 minutes free a day to do it. Otherwise, you can sign up for their plan, which I did. I think it's $10 US a month or something like that, something ridiculous. Now, what it does do is it kicks the format back in a WAV format, so .wav, which was the old audio file format before MP3s and all that came out. So from there, what we do is then depending on what we want to do with it, if the recording, and again, I know there are a lot of podcast hosts that are like really specific and they don't want to even hear anybody take a deep breath. They want it to be pristine and perfect. That's great. I'm not knocking that. I don't do that. But having said that, depending on the guest, there might be some pauses in there or coughs or sneezes or anything like that. Then we run it through an editing program. We've used Odyssey in the past. I think that's what it's called, or
That's
Audify. I don't. I think that's what it was, but we're not. We haven't been using
yeah.
that one in a while. We partnered up with an organization called Resound, so it's resound.fm.
Yeah.
We got a plan through because I ended up buying it through AppSumo, I think, had when they first
Yeah.
launched. I love
Yeah.
that
Lifetime.
platform. They do a
Yeah.
really good job because number one, it gets rid of the dead space. Number two, it makes the audio sound really good. It cleans it up. It does a really good job. You get about, and the plan that I ended up getting was, I think, 4 hours a month. So that would be 8 30-minute interviews, which my interviews tend to be under 30
Yeah.
minutes. So I can usually edit 8 episodes a month. But now that I'm doing, 4 or 5 a week, that's not going to cover the whole month. So for me, it's
Yeah.
like, I kind of do I schedule it accordingly, roll it out and whatnot. But, the team loves using that one. So once that's done, then the audio is uploaded to Podbean. Now, Podbean has, their own platform within it, which is a subscription additional fee, where they have an AI bot basically do the same thing that Resound is doing. I don't know if it's the same quality. I only tested it on one file because I had a trial for it, and I didn't invest into it any further because, well,
Mm.
I already got something else. But having
Yeah.
said that, if you want to streamline things, if it does a decent job, and again, I can't speak to it to know if it does the, audio cuts and the dead sound and things like that. If it does, then that might be something for people to consider if they're looking at that platform to do. So you're not using a bunch of tools. Because again, you want to record the interview, you want to get it posted. You want people to download it and listen to it. And the fewer tools you can use to make that happen, the better it will be for you as far as spending time and everything else, because you could spend hours and hours on a 30-minute interview. And we did in early days. We're like, okay, gotta make it sound good. And I'm like, it's not making a difference. Let's make it sound decent, where it doesn't sound like they're talking to us in an aluminum can, and then we're good. So, and like I said, that interview, I listened to it and I'm like, did I pick the right interview? I swore that was bad. So I went back to the raw file and listened to it. I'm like, that was amazing editing. I should probably do a testimonial for them on that because it was an amazing thing. I would
Yeah.
almost say, here's a before and after, but I'd have to get permission from the guest because that's her
Yeah.
voice, but I don't want to do that. But so once the file's ready, then we upload it to Podbean and schedule it out. That's the beautiful thing too, is so you schedule when they release. We make sure the show notes and all that good stuff are in there. Then from there,
Oh.
from the video side of things, similar thing where, the video, because eventually the show may be just a live type of show. So if it's live, guess what? From the video standpoint, it's live. It's if someone coughs, guess what? It's in there.
Live.
And so we've been testing out some things, and we're probably going to end up making the YouTube side of things live, and of course stream it on the other platforms as well, like TikTok and LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and all the other platforms out there, because there's tools out there that can basically push all of that out to all those different channels. But that's something that we're still kind of thinking through and testing a few things, because again, you spend all your time just doing things like that, and it's like, I got other things I like to do. So it gets to the point where you have to do that. But video is critically important, because YouTube is the #1 podcast channel now. They've passed Spotify, they've passed Apple. YouTube's #1. And a lot of people for the longest time didn't do anything on YouTube as far as their podcast. Now I did.
Hey, just a quick break. If you enjoying the insights so far and want even more behind the scenes ideas, inspiration, and tools for growing your own podcast, join my email list at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. You get access to helpful resources, exclusive updates, and the kind of stuff I only share with my email subscribers. Whether you're starting out or already podcasting, there's something valuable waiting for you. Head over to mypodcaststory.com/join and subscribe. Now, back to the episode.
Early on, I set it up. Thankfully, there was a feature within Podbean that would it would be an audio version, so there wouldn't be a video of like you and me talking, but it would be basically a still shot of the show note or the show if the individual sent a note or uploaded artwork and stuff, and then we'd put it up there. But you'd hear the audio on YouTube, and we had some decent traffic on that, and it was one of those things where it's like, we've got it there, but we're not really doing anything with it. But I have always recorded audio and video, and I just put the video in a folder. I'm like, maybe one day we'll deal with that. Well, one day is showing up. So, we've got hundreds of videos that we have not uploaded to the channel, and we're like, okay, how do we want to go about this? We don't want to just do one massive dump and someone says, okay, I'm gonna listen to or watch the next episode. Okay, you have 270 videos to watch at once. The people are like, there's no way I can do that. So we're strategically trying to figure out what we want to do with that. One of the things that we're toying with is, and we've actually tested it a couple of months ago to see, and just working out some of the kinks, is with a lot of these video platforms, there's a live stream component to it where you can just have all of your videos just play 24/7. And we played around with that a little bit to see, and it was like, it was a little clunky. We got some work to do on that, but eventually I think that might be an option for us, where we just, here's all the content. Push play, you fire up the live channel, you're going to see what you're going to see. And that way it's a good way for people to get exposed to all the content that we have on there. So from there, once that's done, then it's scheduled to go live. On go live day, then our team will send out the links to Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. It's on other platforms. It's on Amazon's. It's on...
But just those are like the major platforms.
Yeah, it's like those are the two. If you listen on another platform, I'm pretty sure the show's on there. If it isn't, let me know. I'll like, okay, what do I got to do to get the show on there? Because most of those platforms, what they do is they grab from the RSS feed from either the host, or they'll say, okay, it's on Apple. So they'll do something and they'll just say, okay, look there for it. And so, that's on platforms I've never heard of. I'm like, I've never heard of that app, but it's on there. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And it's great, because that means a handful of people that are using that particular platform, they might stumble across the show. So it's one of those things where the system kind of flows. We tweak it a bit, and I'm always one to say, okay, can we do it in less steps? Because if we can do it in less steps and not degrade the quality of it or the experience for the guest, or really important, the experience for the listener, then, let's look into it. But again, it's you do this 900 times, eventually you start to get a rhythm, and we're humming along with it. But there's always new tools and things that we could use. But that's kind of the big arching viewpoint of how our show gets made.
Well, quickly, how much would you say it costs for the softwares and probably the members of your team that work on the
Yeah, so let me and I should be able to have this number out the top of my head because my original career was accounting. But well, let's put it this way: we've got Podbean. The plan that I'm on is $108 a year. So that's cheap. I don't want Podbean to hear this, but they probably should charge more. But not me. Everybody else should charge more. Just not me.
Yeah.
The people that I have working, I use a lot of I've used a combination of virtual assistants and people that are local. I've had my editor for a long time was local. And then, the team is starting using the other tools and technologies that we have. We just started leveraging that. But yeah, a good editor is important. So either use the software, and there's, obviously with AI now, there's a lot of great AI-based tools that do a great job with it. So it's unfortunate for a lot of audio engineers that have been working on podcasts for a while that those roles, may not be as popular, but we see that in history. There have been innovations in life where, years ago there wasn't cars and people rode horses or other animals to get around, or they walked, or they rode a bike or something like that. And, innovation came around, and then cars came around, and, there wasn't a need as much for horses with horseshoes. So there's things change. And the key thing to remember is when things change, then you should too. Look for what skills are needed and demand right now, and learn how to do those, because there's this thing called YouTube. I like to call it YouTube University. Or TikTok or Instagram. You can learn how to do pretty much anything. All you have to do is type it in. I want to learn how to do this. You can get online courses. You can get certified in something you want to learn about. Then all of a sudden you have a certificate saying, I know what I'm doing in this. You might not, but at least you got a certificate that says you do. And that can be the big difference, especially if you're looking for work in a particular field where you don't have a lot of or experience in. So yeah, I'm just starting in this, but I have a certificate that says that I'm good at it. Well, that could be the difference for you to get that job versus somebody else. So I hammer this home all the time. I say, I'm a student of life. I'm constantly still learning. I want to continue to learn because I get personal growth out of that, and it just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, I want us to get back on track about you mentioning or listing out the amount you spend on the podcast, and you said Podbean about $108, and Zoom.
So Podbean's $108. Zoom, I think, is $17 now. That's
per month.
$17 a month. That's about $200 a year. So that you're looking at a little over $300 for those two tools. Revoicer, I bought a lifetime plan because it was just an early launch. I don't remember what their monthly costs are, but it would be worth it. If I learned of it now and didn't buy the lifetime plan originally, I would probably still buy it. The Adobe Enhance is $10 a month, so that's $120. Voicer, don't quote me on it, but it's probably around that for a lower tier, maybe $10 to $20 a month. So let's say 20. So we'll say, $250. And if that's lower than what they charge, I apologize. It's just, I'm guessing because I don't remember what the prices was on that. So you're looking 108, and then Zoom is, another, 200, give or take. So that's 300. Voicer would be 250. So it's like $550. These are annual. So $550.
That's about it's $828.
Yeah. So you've got that. And then I mentioned Adobe, so that's another 100.
I was going to mention Go High Level, but then I realized that Go High Level is what you use for your business. It's not
Yeah.
just for the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah. So I
so
didn't.
yeah, I use it for the business. If you're looking
Yeah.
for a calendar tool, Calendly, I think
That's
is like
about
$15,
$10.
it's 10 to 50,
Okay,
yeah.
10.
So, and use
Yeah.
that, and that'll give you all the links you need. So you're looking at that point, $600-700 a year. Now
Okay.
can your people, they do the editing and all that. If you're just starting out, it's probably you. Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's when you're starting up, especially if this is a hobby or if it's something you want to do for a career path, then those are two different conversations. If it's something you're just starting out with to see if it can turn into a business for you, then from there, yeah, there's opportunities, especially as you grow your
Yeah.
show. You can get sponsorship, you can get ads, go with local companies first, because they tend to be a little bit easier because you go in and say, okay, here's what I've got, here's what I'm doing, mention sweeten it up. So yeah, I'm going to feature all the time. They love that. And you can get, some money to help offset the cost of the show. And then
Yeah.
as you grow, then, there are, shows, mine is included where I've got relationships with a lot of PR companies, and they sponsor their guests to appear on the show because they want the promotion. They want to get the show out right away because they're promoting a new book or a new talk or something like that. So, been able to monetize the show a bit about that. Platforms like Podbean have a marketplace now where one, you can have ads inserted into your show, and I do that. So you might listen to the show and there might be an ad that drops in the middle of the interview, or they also have a platform where I can pay advertise my show to be on other shows. So basically I would pay whatever it happens to be. I don't remember the number, where you know the host of that particular show will say, if you like my show, you should listen to the Breakfast Leaders Show hosted by Michael
Yeah.
Levitt. We talk to the thought leaders, and they do whatever spiel they do. And that's, getting more listeners to the show. Because once you get listeners to the point where it starts growing, then you can start generating more ad revenue. And then it gets to the point where all of a sudden your show now becomes a business or a leg of an overarching business, like what I have with my organization. It's a component of. It's not the only thing that I do, but it is a component of it where it can be, and for many shows that have been on for a while or have a decent audience, it can be a decent revenue stream for the company,
Yeah.
and from there, you can take it to wherever you want to go, because again, it boils down to, as a host, you have a voice, you have opinions, you have interest. And what happens is when you interview people that are similar to you, all of a sudden you have this opportunity to build a tribe of people that listen to your show all the time. And I know I have people that are that way. I'm still confused why they'd want to listen to me, but they do. And I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
mean, is your life that bad that you have to just listen to me? But I joke and I play fun with it, but I
Yeah.
know they listen because of the people that I bring onto the show and the conversations that we have that either help them grow, help them learn something new, get maybe a different perspective of things, or just renew their hope in challenging times. So it's something that I take very seriously, although I have a lot of fun with it. It's something that I'm very, very passionate about, and it's an integral part of the work that I do today. The podcast is something that I cherish. If the other things went away and I just did the podcast, yeah, I would be okay with that. If the
Well,
podcast went away and I just did the other stuff, I don't think I would be as happy. So it's definitely something that I thoroughly enjoy doing.
yeah. Earlier on, when you started talking about the kind of the origin story of where you started your podcast, you did mention that you had your business, the Breakfast Leadership, 2 years prior to when you started the podcast. So right
Mhm.
now it's about 8 years, which means the business is about 10 years right now. Um, how does the podcast connect to the ecosystem of the business? Now, of course, you mentioned about ads, sponsorships, and But I just want to see what's the how does it connect? What's the ecosystem like for the?
Yeah, for me, the podcast is just an additional pillar for me when I'm working with organizations as a consultant, being a thought leader. I can share the stories, and quite frankly, when you talk to C-suite executives and Fortune 500 consultants and professors and all of that, you have this reservoir of amazing information that is accessible. I can pretty much reach out to anybody that I've ever had a conversation with and say, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?" And they will respond. And, if I see stuff that I'm like, you know what, I think Ron would really like to hear this or see this. So I'll tag him or I'll just email him and say, "Hey, I saw this article. I think this would be good." Or I just met somebody. I think you'd be really good to meet. And I just literally had a guest do that to me a half an hour before our chat today. She reached
Wow.
out to me, said, "You know what? I was talking with this person. I think the two of you should meet and see where things go." And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Again, I just had a conversation with this individual. I interviewed them. We talked about what they do and why it's important for people to do what she talks about. And she, out of the blue said, "You know what? I want you to meet this person." Awesome, thanks. And it's things like that really help grow the business because, and again, we just had this happen today. I don't know what will come of it, but there is definitely a potential consulting opportunity for me to work with that organization that this person is part of, for me to help them with a variety of different things that they might be struggling with. I don't know if they are, but they might be. So I won't know unless I ask. And, that ask is a whole lot easier because a first for you today, is your team struggling with retention? You sound like a commercial and nobody wants that.
Spam.
I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
not. Yeah, I'm not. Bye. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not well. Bye. And your email didn't make it any better. Bye.
Yeah.
I say that but people are trying really hard because they want to grow their own business, and I don't want to shut
Yeah.
people down on things, but it's not easy. Cold calling and cold emailing and all that stuff. We are so inundated with it now, where we don't look at any of it, or we just like, I can't. And is there a chance we could miss something? Possibly, but don't go into that fear of missing out, because then you're going to look at every email message, including all the ones that are in your spam folder. Don't click the links, by the way. You just don't. This kind of goes back to how you run a podcast and do other things as well. You have to be really good with how you spend your time and
Yeah.
allocate it and learn. And it's not a case, well, okay, I need to spend 2 hours on this and an hour on this or that. You need to spend the amount of time on it that you need to spend on it. It might be longer, it might be shorter. It all depends on you, your energy, the systems you have in place, and constantly tweak it. Look for opportunities to grow it. So, to go back to your original question, the podcast helps me with connecting with potential keynote talks or consulting or writing opportunities, or you name it. There's it opens up a lot of doors, much like
Yeah.
writing books. I've published, multiple books, but 3 professionally published ones, and through a book publisher. And those are amazing because only a small percentage of the global population has ever written a book, even though with all the books you see, such a small percentage have. And I'm in that boat, which I sometimes forget, but then I look and see the books are right over there. So I know I wrote them. I remember, the time it took to write the thing, so that it's not a short-term thing. Again, much like the podcast, that opens up doors. It's like, well, here's a book that you can read about what I talk about, or
Yeah.
here's my show when I talk about these things, about burnout or workplace culture or keeping people happy at work and helping them grow and all of that. It all connects. It's an ecosystem. It's not like, okay, my podcast is about this, and then I write about Formula One, and then when I'm speaking, I speak on cardiac health. No, everything's pretty much the same. So I can literally pick up and go, I might be writing today, I might be doing the podcast today, I might be at a keynote today, I might be not doing any of those things today. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's for me, I've thankfully, and it's taken time, designed this ecosystem that I call breakfast leadership that has been, something that, was birthed out of my own personal journey with burnout that has morphed into, talking with great human beings across the globe about some amazing things.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. One final question. W- What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about starting a podcast, second guessing themselves, starting a podcast, or maybe they started a podcast, well, 3 months into it, they kind of quit the podcast, but they deeply want to do a podcast?
Yeah, that's the majority of podcasts. And I don't know what the latest stats are, but the stats for a long time were majority of podcasts that were out there were 12 episodes. And then people just stopped. It's effort. It takes time. You're in all likelihood when you do your first few, they're going to be garbage. And I'm not saying that, they're bad, horrible, throw them away. What I mean by that is they're not going to be the best version of you. Why? Because you just started. A very finite number of people are able to just start with never doing anything like something like a podcast, start and have it be amazing right out of the gate. Now, there's some dynamic personalities, and they launch, and we see it all the time. A lot of famous people have been launching podcasts over the last few years, which is good, because it helps. And some people are like, oh, that's just another way to promote. It's like most of them tend to show a side of them that we normally don't get to see because they're performers or artists or actors or sports athletes. They're sharing some inside things that you would never hear on a microphone interview in the locker room or backstage at a concert hall. They're sharing their personal things. And what that does is it helps connect us more. So when someone says they want to, or they're thinking about launching a podcast, my first reaction, just like if somebody says I'm thinking about writing a book, is the same answer. Please do it. And they're like, well, I don't know what to talk about. What are we talking about right now? What do you like talking about? What are you passionate about? Talk about that. And if you get bored with that, talk about something else. Invite some friends or colleagues or maybe a former boss, or if you really want to get it spicy, maybe, invite your ex-spouse to interview on the show. You're going to want good editing after that one if your relationship isn't good. So just telling you that although that I just thought of that might be a really, especially for somebody somewhat famous, that gets viral, man. You might get a bazillion downloads because it's crazy. But I say that, but it's funny what goes viral and what should go viral and what goes viral don't often intersect. But that's another story for another day. But if you're thinking about doing a podcast, it's easy to do. What kind of tools do you need? If you have a smartphone and there's apps on there where you can go live on your phone, hit record, start talking. Anywhere, you can be anywhere. As long as it has a good, cell connection, you can be anywhere. Just record. You can do video or audio. If you can do video, you do both if you can. Just don't even have to use Zoom. All the tools we talked about. I forget the platform that's out there. I know there's probably a bunch now, but there was a platform that literally didn't cost anything. You just click record, and actually you could do it on social media. You could have an Instagram show or a TikTok show or a YouTube show. Go live, start talking, and it's there. Go in and update the notes and where people can find you, and send them to your lead magnets or offerings or whatever you want to build them to. But it's there, and all it's going to cost is a little bit of your time and whatever you pay a month for your cell phone bill. And that's it. You don't need Zoom. You don't need Podmatch. You don't need any of those things if you want to use those platforms. Now, having said that, a caveat to that is, unfortunately, and we've seen this with Facebook and other things too, where when you're using another platform, like a social media platform like TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, you're at the mercy of those platforms. They can say, you know what? We're not going to show your content to a lot of people because for some reason it's not there. Or like in the situation in the United States where, TikTok, was voted to be banned. It was banned for a day, and then President Trump restored it and has, had a couple extensions on that ban until they sort out ownership and things like that. It's political in nature, of course. I'm not going to go
Yeah.
too deep into it, but it's a political thing between the country that TikTok is originally based out of in the US, and I avoid that. It's like, because I know a lot of people, their businesses are on TikTok, their livelihoods there, and if it does go away, it's going to hurt a lot of people. So
Yeah.
it's, and that's a whole different subject, but you don't need to spend all the money that we talked about. You could just start with whatever platforms out there, build, audience. If it's an audience of one, great. If it turns into 10, great. If it turns into 100 or 1,000, next thing you know, you've got all these people that are tuning in every time you do it. The second thing, really important, and this is the part that really hurts people, and why they get out of it, is there is a consistency requirement here. You need to be consistent, whether it's you release once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, 5 times a day, or 5 times a week. You have to be consistent, because when you're not, then your audience goes, I don't know when they're going to release an episode again. And then they just unsubscribe, or they quit listening, or the algorithm quits feeding your former audience the feed because you're not active. So you got to ask yourself, okay, what do I want? What do I want to do? And my recommendation is, if it's not live, if you're recording and you're going to upload episodes, record at least 20 episodes before you even hit go live or turn it on. Just record it before you upload it. And the reason why is it's a good indicator for you, because if you get to like 10 episodes and you're like, I don't like this, pause, check yourself and see, okay, do I really want to do this? And if you don't, that's fine. You don't have to. But and then again, that's why, most shows, ended after, a dozen or so episodes, because people just literally ran out of gas, because they like, okay, I've talked about everything I want to talk about, which is not true, because, most of us, once we learn to start talking when we were infants, most of us never stop. Especially in
Yeah.
this industry. If you like talking, this is the industry for you. You'll have
Yeah.
no shortage of work. But those are just some tips that came to the top of my mind right now that do it.
Yeah.
But obviously, people can reach out to me. More than happy to help them any way that I can, to ideas, or pick my brain or whatever, to help grow their show.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the podcast and sharing the behind the scenes of your podcast.
Thank you so much.
Learn more about you.
Yeah, breakfastleadership.com is the website, and there's a menu bar, and you can see all kinds of different things that we do there. The Breakfast Leadership show is on pretty much all the major platforms. Like I said, episodes are releasing just about every day right now. Summer, I may crank that back a little bit. Just depends on how many guests that I book and all of that kind of stuff. But for me, I could release them in the summer, but I don't know what listener, I got to look at the stats and see, does listenership drop off? Because if it drops off a bit in the summer, then what I like to do is like scale back a little bit. So that way, when listeners start coming back after their summer holidays, then the people that'll be on the show, more people are going to hear it. And sometimes I've done it in the past too, where I've done like a best of, where I picked like a dozen or so shows. So for a month or two, I just went with the, repeat of an old show kind of thing. And I would record an intro on it saying why it was, a show that stuck out for me. But breakfastleadership.com, best way to find me.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's
My
been
pleasure.
a honor.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I am Wisdom Okonkwo, and I hope this conversation sparked new ideas and gave you a deeper look into the heart of podcasting. If you've loved this episode, consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/wisdomhq. Every bit helps keep the stories going. And hey, don't forget to follow, rate, and share this podcast with another podcaster or creator who would find it helpful. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.